Since having Flat Earth Dave on the Big Questions podcast, I've come to realize that there are a bunch of conspiracy theories out there that are worth exploring. And so I've decided to start dealing with some of these theories in my videos. In this video, I want to deal with another conspiracy, another big lie that we've all been fed. And the truth will shock you. This conspiracy theory is not about the shape of the Earth. It's not about COVID-19 or JFK's assassination or the events that transpired on 9/11. This conspiracy theory is about ghosts. That's right, ghosts. All your life you've been told that ghosts are a figment of your imagination, but I'm here to tell you today, my friends, that you've been duped. You have been deceived. Ghosts are real. How do I know ghosts are real? Well, quite simply, because I have met them before. And in fact, there was one ghost in particular that I got to know quite well. And that's the story I want to tell you today in this video. This ghost haunted a quiet side street in a suburban neighborhood where I used to live. And he would appear with ritualistic regularity every morning, every noon hour, and every evening. At the appointed times, the ghost would drift along the sidewalk with vacant eyes. Consumed by some hollow hunger, it slid past people without noticing or being noticed. It was trapped in a loop, repeating the same pattern day in and day out, until one fine spring morning, when it rounded the corner onto this quiet side street and stopped dead in its tracks. How unusual. It had never done this before, so why now? What did it see that made it freeze? Was it the Ghostbusters? Scooby-Doo? Some other paranormal investigator, perhaps? Unfortunately, it wasn't that exciting, my friends. It was cherry blossoms. That's what froze the ghost in place. See, for a few weeks in April, this particular street undergoes a radical and sudden transformation. Twin rows of cherry trees line the sidewalk. The branches, they reach overhead and across and weave together, interlocking like fingers and forming a domed breezeway. For most of the year, these trees are skeletal, but in early spring they awaken from winter's sleep. Bare branches burst open with coral and pink petals. The entire street fills with a sweet aroma. And in the early morning, dawn's light breaks over a nearby mountain and hits the branches, turning them into a stained glass ceiling. The entire scene is both surreal and staggering, breathtaking and awe-inspiring. Yet, despite making its rounds for years and seeing spring come and go, the ghost had never noticed this spectacular display until that fateful day some 7 or 8 years ago. On that particular day, the combination of the scent of cherry and sea salt in the breeze, the golden rays of light, the chill morning air with its promise of warmth to come. These things struck the ghost and appeared swollen with mystery, beauty, potential. And at that moment, the ghost began to materialize and take shape in the realm of the living. Now, in case it isn't clear by now, I am, or at least I was, that ghost. I know it sounds like a joke or a metaphor, but I assure you it isn't. I truly was ghostly, only partially present in the realm of the living, and at the same time, totally unaware of my predicament. Each day I walked up and down that street on my way to the office, but I wasn't there at all. Instead, I was dwelling in the past, or I was straining to peer at some imagined future. Or else I fantasized of relief. Relief from the pale hunger, the unknown craving for unknown things that gripped me for, well, my entire adult life. I moved to Vancouver Island in 1991, but I didn't start living here until the spring of 2013. My body was here for all those years, but my mind was elsewhere. Until I encountered the cherry trees for the first time, I was anywhere but here. I was flying to Australia and getting a work visa. I was moving to Calgary with my friends. And then later on, I was buying property on the east coast of Canada where housing is still reasonably priced. Now, to be clear, I did none of these things, but I wanted to, very badly. And my daily thoughts were consumed by these fantasies and plans. I craved for escape. As I've said in the past, I was looking for a way out. But a way out of what? I had no clue. So I assumed that there must be something wrong with the place I was living in, and I made plans to leave. The urge to go off on adventures in strange new places reminds me of something the Roman philosopher Seneca wrote in a letter to his friend Lucilius. Lucilius had been vacationing extensively around the known world, but for some reason, these adventures failed to relieve his melancholy. Upon hearing about this in a letter from his friend, Seneca wrote the following reply. What pleasure is there in seeing new lands, in surveying cities and spots of interest? All your bustle is useless. And if you want to know why, the answer is simply this. You are running away in your own company. You have to lay aside the burden on your mind. Until you do that, nowhere will satisfy you. Moving away would have done me little good. Like Seneca's friend Lucilius, my mind was burdened, haunted by notions and ideas and obsessions, likes and dislikes, desires and aversions. My desire to be anywhere but here was the manifestation of an unconscious urge, the urge to escape these mental burdens. Like Lucilius, I too was dragging the source of my discontent around with me everywhere I went. To escape these burdens, I would need to do a lot more than just change my postal code. Of course, I didn't know any of this stuff back in 2013, but luckily for me, things started to happen on their own. And before I knew it, my path to freedom opened up and I followed it without thinking. First, it was the cherry trees. Next, I became aware of music playing in my backyard every evening. To my surprise, an avian orchestra had taken residence in the tall pines, and it performed concerts of staggering beauty in the hours before dusk. Now, without a doubt, this had been going on all along, but like the cherry trees, I had been oblivious. But now, it wasn't uncommon to find me laying in the grass, fully engrossed by the melody of birdsong. Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, these guys are amateurs compared to the winged composers who live behind my townhouse. Next, I was consumed by this weird urge to feel the earth beneath my feet. So I started walking to and from the office with my shoes and socks in hand. Yes, I got a lot of weird looks on my walks to work, but I didn't really care. I felt so connected. I felt like I was a part of everything for the first time, you know? And then, as spring blossomed into summer, my transformation from ghost to flesh shifted into hyperdrive. The culmination of this came in July when I spent a day at the beach with friends and family. Let me set the stage for you. It was the perfect summer day. The perfect combination of sun and breeze. Good company, good food and good conversation. Activity and relaxation. Now, at one point, I was sitting next to my oldest daughter. We were eating crab we had just caught on my friend's boat a few hours earlier. The sand was pleasantly warm under my feet, and the sigh and rasp of the tide coming in and out lulled me into a state of deep serenity. As I looked around me at my best friends and my wife and kids, at the beautiful scenery and the beautiful blue sky and the sun beating down on us, I realized for the first time that I was living in paradise. In that moment, I had everything I could possibly ask for, and then some. The desire to move away, to fill the void, to find some kind of fulfillment out there somewhere, dissolved completely and was replaced by a surge of gratitude that encompassed not only my friends and my family and my circumstances, but the whole of creation, the entire universe. Some might call this a mystical experience. Others might call it an awakening. I simply call it becoming present. Before these events, I lived in nostalgia and for future fulfillment. After these events, I came home at long last to the only place that truly exists. This place at this very moment, here and now. Initially, I wanted to philosophize with you in this video. I wanted to talk to you about how time is a unit of measurement devised by clever apes for matters of practical convenience and expediency. I wanted to tell you that time exists in the mind alone and that it has no grounding in reality. But where would that get us? The theme of presence demands more than this intellectual posturing. So I'll save the philosophizing for another video. For now, let's cut straight to the chase and answer the question you're probably asking yourself at this moment. Why bother being present? What's the point? For starters, when we're fully present, the people in our lives feel heard and therefore valued. They feel heard because they actually are being heard. You see, when you're present, you can't help but listen and hear people. And so, in this way, you can resolve conflicts more easily. You can mend hurt. You can diffuse anger. And so, for this reason alone, our presence is a present to the people around us. But maybe that's not enough for you. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, but what's in it for me, Ollie? Don't worry, I got you covered. Presence is the gift that keeps on giving. And in my experience, what presence does is it brings inner stillness into your life. The more I'm present, the more I feel at peace with the way things are. The more I realize that everything is okay. Because, as I've come to discover, the majority of my problems exist in time. In past events, which are merely echoes of the present, or in future events, which may or may not even come to pass. In my desire for things I don't have yet, or in my longing for things I had and then lost. A Zen master by the name of Rinzai used to illustrate this point by asking his students the following question: what, at this moment, is lacking? I'll give you a second to think about that. What, at this moment, is lacking? The answer, I have found, is nothing. At this moment, I have everything I need, here and now. It's only when I compare this moment to other bygone moments, or when I peer ahead to some expected moment in the future, that so-called problems arise. So for me, being present is a remedy for unnecessary suffering. It's kind of like finding the eye of the storm, you know? While the winds of desire and aversion, anger and anxiety swirl and churn all around me, I sit quietly in the center, untouched. The present moment is the center. Now, of course, this is not an invitation to stick your proverbial head in the sand. I'm not suggesting that we ignore the negative circumstances in our lives, forget all about the past, or ignore the inevitabilities of the future. That would be silly. As I see it, the idea is not to forget about the past, but to learn from it. Not to ignore the future, but to plan for it. And, most importantly of all, to live in the present. Sounds pretty simple in theory, right? So why is it so difficult in practice? To answer this question, I rely heavily on the experts, psychologists, philosophers, and spiritual teachers of the present and past. And what I found, both through this research and through self-experimentation, is that presence is relatively easy to achieve in the short term and notoriously difficult to maintain over longer periods of time. I also found that my presence hinges on two factors: awareness and mind. When I'm unaware of the mind, it directs my awareness for me. That's when I become consumed by my judgments and speculations, assumptions and expectations. I become distracted. This is when I lie awake at night, reliving old traumas that happened to me in like grade 3, or running circles around looming concerns. That's when I know the mind is running the show, because it's telling me, look at this thought over here. Now, what about this problem? Let's talk about that for a little while. And if I allow it, it'll just keep doing this until I pass out. Eckhart Tolle suggests that practicing mindfulness brings more presence into our lives, and rightfully so. When I am aware of the mind, it can no longer distract me with its stories about the way things are and ought to be. It can no longer lead me away from the reality of the present moment. For this reason, I make a point to pause multiple times a day and ask myself, Ollie, what are you thinking, feeling, and doing at this exact moment? Doing this forces me to pause, even if only for a minute, and dedicate my full attention to the present moment. Ideally, I wouldn't need these reminders. I would remain fully immersed in the moment and never stray. But because I live in and have been conditioned by a cultural system that is obsessed with time and the notion of future fulfillment, I need all the reminders I can get. Because being present isn't like pushing a button once and forgetting about it. It's a habit. And the only way to build it is to reinforce it through repetition. In other words, by returning to the present moment over and over again, using whatever path or method leads us there, and then embracing whatever we find in the present moment. Because whether it's a difficult situation, a negative thought, or a shameful feeling, we have to accept it as part of the present moment, without beating ourselves up, without adding unnecessary pain to it. That's the only way we can hope to resolve or improve whatever it is that we're dealing with at that point. The alternative, denying, resisting, turning a blind eye, leads to that ghostly existence I described at the beginning. Drifting without direction, searching but never knowing what for. The ghost is trapped in an invisible prison of its own creation and is convinced at the same time that it is utterly free. It is disconnected from the reality of the now, entangled in a web of longing and yearning and regret. It's quite the predicament, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Well, friends, as always, these are merely my thoughts and experiences on the topic of presence. And as always, I encourage you to share your own thoughts and experiences on these topics in the comments below. I look forward to hearing from you, and until next time, live well, my friends.